I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Last week, we reported that the MAGA Republicans in the House of Representatives, led by Jim Jordan, who despicably chairs the House Judiciary Committee, sent a letter to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office attempting to interfere with the criminal investigation into Donald Trump and the grand jury proceedings there, as indictments are imminent against Donald Trump. As part of the letter sent by Jim Jordan, a request was made for the production of records by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, as well as for the appearance by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office before the House Judiciary Committee. It's fairly unprecedented for the House of Representatives to utilize a Judiciary Committee to try to interfere with a criminal investigation by local and state prosecutorial authorities, but as the MAGA Republicans like to say, they're investigating weaponization. Everything with them is pure projection. They are the ones clearly engaged in weaponization. As with all things they do, it's projection, projection, projection. So, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, his office sent a scathing letter back to the MAGA Republicans in the House of Representatives, reminding them of the fact that in our federalism society, you have the federal government and you have states. The fact that the House of Representatives has no authority to intervene and to interfere with the work of a local prosecutorial authority. Let me read for you this letter right now that was sent by Alvin Bragg. This letter is dated March 23rd, 2023. Dear Chairman Jordan, Chairman Steele, and Chairman Comer, the District Attorney of New York County is investigating allegations that Donald Trump engaged in violations of New York State penal law. The investigation is one of thousands conducted by the Office of the District Attorney in its long history of pursuing justice and protecting New Yorkers. The investigation has been conducted consistently with the District Attorney's oath to faithfully execute the laws of the state of New York. The District Attorney pledged that the DA's office would, quote, publicly state the conclusion of our investigation, whether we conclude our work without bringing charges or move forward with an indictment. He stands by that pledge, and if charges are brought at the conclusion, it will be because the rule of law and faithful execution of the district attorney's duties require it. Your letter dated March 20th, 2023, the letter, in contrast, is an unprecedented inquiry into a pending local prosecution. The letter only came after Donald Trump created a false expectation that he would be arrested the next day, and his lawyers reportedly urged you to intervene. Neither fact is a legitimate basis for congressional inquiry. In New York, the district attorney is a constitutional officer charged with the responsibility to conduct all prosecutions for crimes and offenses cognizable by the courts of the county in which he serves. Goes on to say, these are quintessential police powers belonging to the state, and your letter treads into territory very clearly reserved to the states. It suggests that Congress's investigation is being, quote, conducted solely for the personal aggrandizement of the investigation or to punish those investigated, and is therefore indefensible. As articulated below, the district attorney is obliged by federal and state constitutions to protect the independence of state law enforcement functions from federal interference. The DA's office therefore requests an opportunity to meet and confer with committee staff to better understand what information the DA's office can provide that relates to a legitimate legislative interest and can be shared consistent with the district attorney's constitutional obligations. It goes on to say, compliance with the letter would interfere with law enforcement. The letter seeks non-public information about pending criminal investigations, which is confidential under state law. Goes on to say the confidentiality provisions within New York state law exist to protect the interests of the various participants in the criminal process, the defendant, the witnesses, and members of the grand jury, as well as the integrity of the grand jury proceeding itself. Like the Department of Justice, as a prosecutor exercising sovereign executive powers, the district attorney has constitutional obligations to protect the government's ability to prosecute fully and fairly, to independently and impartially uphold the rule of law, to protect witnesses and law enforcement, to avoid flight by those implicated in our investigations, and prevent additional crime. So, consistent with these constitutional obligations, the DA's office is cognizant of the Department of Justice's long-standing policy of not providing Congress with non-public information about its investigations. And so here we have the New York Attorney General and the Manhattan District Attorney and the Department of Justice and all of the law enforcement agencies that engage in these criminal investigations or civil investigations. What they're not supposed to do is turn over their confidential investigative files just because Jim Jordan says so. And here, the district attorney's office is analogizing to federal AG procedures, state AG procedures, and saying, look, we don't have to do that. There's secrecy in our criminal investigative process. And it goes on to say, the requests by Jim Jordan regarding the exercise of state police powers violate New York's sovereignty. The letter's requests are an unlawful incursion into New York's sovereignty. Congress's investigative jurisdiction is derived from and limited by its powers to legislate concerning federal matters, and the Constitution limits Congress's power to those specifically enumerated in the 10th Amendment, which ensures that any enumerated powers are reserved to the states. It is therefore generally understood that a congressional committee may not inquire into matters which are reserved to the states. In other words, the Constitution says you don't have the right to probe and to get into our criminal investigations of Donald Trump. Goes on to say, congressional review of a pending criminal investigation usurps executive powers. Congress is not the appropriate branch to review criminal matters. As the Supreme Court noted in Watkins, a Supreme Court case, Congress is not a law enforcement or trial agency. These are functions of the executive and judicial departments of the government. The power of Congress to investigate must not be confused with any of the powers of law enforcement. Those powers are assigned under the Constitution to the executive and the judiciary. And again, just basically another way of saying you're weaponizing your role in the House of Representatives. The letter goes on to say, if a grand jury brings charges against Donald Trump, the DA's office will have an obligation, as in every case, to provide a significant amount of discovery from its files to the defendant so that he may prepare a defense. The letter's allegation that the DA's office is pursuing a prosecution for political purposes is unfounded, and regardless, the proper forum for such a challenge is the courts of New York, which are equipped to consider and review such objections. In addition, review by the U.S. Supreme Court would be available to the extent any criminal case raises federal issues. That is the mechanism afforded to every defendant in a criminal case. Congress has no role to play in the review, especially as to a pending criminal proceeding. And then finally, they go on to say any claim of federal funding is insufficient to justify jurisdiction. The letter indicates that the House of Representatives' request from the MAGA Republicans may be related to a review of federal public safety funds, but the letter does not suggest any way in which either the district attorney's testimony about his prosecutorial decisions or the documents and communications of former assistant district attorneys on a pending criminal investigation would shed light on that review. And finally, in closing, the letter says, We trust that you appreciate the importance of our federal system, state law enforcement activities, and the critical need to maintain the integrity and independence of state criminal enforcement from federal interference. While the DA's office will not allow a congressional investigation to impede the exercise of New York's sovereign police power, this office will always treat a fellow government entity with due respect. Therefore, again, we request a meet and confer to understand whether the committee has any legitimate legislative purpose. So that's how you actually write a letter like adults, right? That's how responsible people communicate with each other in government. Whereas the MAGA Republicans send these letters with all caps, weaponization, politicization, whatever their fake outrage machine du jour of the day is to hoist up their Trumpian cult. What you do here, what this letter reflects, is the Manhattan District Attorney's Office is following the evidence. They are following the facts. They will be led by the goals to secure justice, and they will comport their behavior and conduct within their legitimate roles of the Constitution, and they will not be fearful, they will not be intimidated by the House of Representatives encroaching on their sovereignty. It's that simple, folks. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit subscribe. We are on our way to 1 million subscribers in this month of March. Help us get to that 1 million subscriber mark, will you? Please help us. Check us out. Go to patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Also, wherever you go and get your audio podcast, search the MeidasTouch podcast and check us out there. And if you're not already a member of our Patreon, go to patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. We're not funded by any outside investors, so those memberships help allow us to continue this network. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas.
Our blue wall stopped the red wave and election deniers got denied election. That's why we're celebrating with the new Democracy Prevails team. We've got lots of work to do, but we should all be proud that when democracy was tested, democracy prevailed. You've earned this. Don't wait. Get yours right now at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.